Hey, good afternoon, evening, or whatever it might be in whatever time zone you're in. Welcome to the Brian Searle less, but technical difficulty plagued Outwired this week, everybody. Sorry that we're late. I believe it's all my fault. And that's just my go-to response whenever something goes wrong. But Scott, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
You had no part in the delay or the technical difficulties. You were here on time as promised. It was pretty much just me. Not pretty much. Let's just say it was me. Had great help from
silent observer.
Well, and it could be, and hopefully we get through this. I'm under a severe thunderstorm warning, and things are rumbling pretty hard outside right now. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah. So let's hope for if I don't get. There. I was glitching. I almost got us out of this. All right. So, rather than climbing into the what came across your desk this week, well, let's do that really quickly. That's kind of our go-to opening. What has come across your desk this week, Scott?
What's come across is the level of interest in what's really going on out there, because of it just seems like there's a lot of mixed perceptions. I don't think that there's anything anyone's doing purposely or anything, but it seems like, I've been getting a lot of inquiries from people about what's happening, where are things going. I feel like there's on some of the topics we covered in the past, for example, the national parks stuff, I feel like that it's looking like they're gonna cut close to $1 billion from the budget. So there's that. The sale of our public lands is going to impact a lot of people. Just briefly, I always say briefly, and it's never brief, but in one of the articles I read, it was by Powder magazine, about how this could impact some ski areas, especially out west, where they currently have special use leases. And it isn't just that for them personally, the special use lease, but many of them are adjacent to these public lands, and several are adjacent to lands that are targeted for this sale. And it could dramatically impact these businesses and that industry in the Mountain West. So, that's kind of where my head's at today. I still feel strongly that people need to voice their opinions to their congressional delegation, and express support if we're in outdoor hospitality, and this is really important for us. And I feel like a lot of people in Washington are, and let's face it, on the East Coast, I live on the East Coast, so I can say this, that the idea of what these public lands are in the West doesn't really, I don't know if it sinks in or if they feel like it doesn't affect them or not, but it's really important anyway, in my point of view. These resources account for a lot of usage in our sector.
And I agree with you on all points there, especially the just public lands in general, right? To your point, not just the national parks, but selling off, whether it be BLM land, land that is maybe held in trust by an agency or an organization that we don't even know of, but it's public land, right? There's there's going to be a lot of trickle down from that. And I think I'm in Ohio. And this is a state where, if I'm not mistaken, something like 3.6 or 3.4% of the land is public. So I don't think people here understand it quite as much as the folks out west who realize that they have millions of acres of land that they get to enjoy that's held in trust, even if it's not actively managed. There's a lot of BLM land that's not actively managed like certain national parks are, right? But it's available. There's a lot of boondocking and overlanding and other things that happen there, right? All of that stuff goes away. Well, then what are those? And you probably know what a lot of the trickle down is, but boy, you're talking about an awful lot of small mom and pop businesses in the small rural towns that are around there. They're going to get affected really fast if that land.
They are. When you consider the number of nights that people spend on public lands each year, it accounts for a decent proportion of the market, enough that it is going to push people into other places. I think, again, and then when you think about how people might want to go and stay in the national park, but I think there's several hundred sites are being targeted to close within the national parks campsites. So, again, what you have there is this kind of snowball effect where people will look for alternatives, but those alternatives may not be there. And then the areas surrounding these parks, a lot of people use the public lands to stay on, as for overflow even.
Yep.
So again, you're going to see that ripple effect throughout. So anyway, not to hijack the whole show with that, but I sometimes do that.
Well, it does seem like and I did. I've got my anyway tracker, and let me just write that down. That was our first anyway of the show today.
Okay.
We got our first one in. We got it pretty early, and I think it was well timed. But because it seems like we are on this topic a lot, but I think partially that's because we are, you and I especially, and to a lesser degree maybe, but Brian, we're conservationists, and I think you said it last week. It seems like a bit of a vacuum, but I think the industry as a whole would do well to consider taking more of an advocacy standpoint on all things conservation, whether it be land use, land preservation. We require, our industry, campgrounds, glamping, we require healthy, vibrant ecosystems in order to draw people out. It's what people come to us for. Even the parks that are urban, that are near cities, they don't look like parking lots, most of them, at least not the successful ones. People want trees, they want green space. There's a real connection to that's built into our brains. And if we lose that, I think the industry as a whole suffers. And so I think, maybe that's our call to action here today for the show is, if you're out there and you're a campground owner and you're not thinking about it, maybe start considering that. Maybe start asking to Scott's point, use your voice, use your email, use the power of whatever connection you have to start asking questions and turning over rocks and looking at who that you have voted for or maybe haven't voted for, who's supporting this stuff. Because if we continue the sell-off and if we continue to minimize the importance of conservation, the importance of healthy and vibrant ecosystems, long-term, that is really going to hurt us. It's very, very short-term play, and it's not going to end positively for us as an industry, I don't think.
I don't either. And just to put a bow on this, what came across my desk is that 70% of all the camping nights spent in 2024 were on either a public campground or public land. So that's our industry. If you're a campground owner, you're in that 30%. But maybe you see it as an opportunity, but we could have that conversation at a different time. But just so people know and understand what it is that people are doing out there, it's big.
It really is. And I remember this from my very first time going to KOAU when we converted our campground that we had owned for 17 or so years to a KOA, and hearing your data. It might have been one of the first studies you did because it was in the winter of 2012 going into 2013. And I recall it being roughly 70% of all camper nights happen in a tent. And they didn't link that to private land, public land, but they just said most of that's in a tent.
Right.
Well, and the reason for that is that a lot of those folks are backcountry camping. So okay, so maybe you're not going to capture those folks, right? And to your point, maybe private campground owners do see that as an opportunity. They go, well, if we sell off these public lands, these guys are going to want to come to my campground and camp. They're not really. It's just going to be unfortunate for them. You know, I do backcountry camping, and it's a completely different experience. And the people that I run into out there, I don't ever expect to run into at a developed campground, and I probably won't. They're looking for something completely different. To take that away from them is really to take that away from all of us, because again, those lands are held in public trust. They're for all of us, whether you use them or not. Yeah. So I think you're right. I think it's time for an anyway, and we maybe move on to the rest of the show, which, by the way, has a very Colombian sort of bent to it today. Are some park owners high on their own fairy dust? That was not written by an Escobar. That none of those people, has no one from Cali had anything to do with that. However, here we are. So today I thought we thought we would jump into a little bit about what's going on in the market right now as far as parks selling, parks being purchased. There's a lot of caution, a lot of wait and see, but I really feel like if you're looking to buy a park and you've got yourself in a really good cash position, this is probably your time. I remember being on fireside chats with Brian during the pandemic and saying, you know, I'm watching these deals go through, because I had sold my park in 2020, and you know, selling off your job is a little bit of a scary thing. I picked up some consulting work right away, but it was not what I wanted to be doing. I kind of wanted to reinvest, because I'm looking at, I sold my park at exactly the time when I probably should have hung on to it, but for family reasons, we just needed to sell. Mom and dad were aging out. They had both gone through very recently a couple of scares with cancer, each of them. And so it was like, okay, it's clear. We need to sell this thing. They can have some time to enjoy that. And, you know, I can figure it out. I'm young enough, right? So then I start looking at, well, let's buy parks. And then I start seeing the absolute madness that is campground valuation during the pandemic, because everybody was convinced they had, you know, the goose that lays the platinum eggs. Forget about gold. I mean, valuations were crazy. And as I watched this go on and I saw parks selling at these crazy valuations, I thought, my goodness, if this thing ends, because at the time it was an if, you know, who knows, is COVID going to stay like this? Are we all going to wear masks for eternity? Right? Nobody knew. But as things went on, you start to see that the valuations that they bought at, when things normalize, holy cow, it's going to be really hard for a lot of these people. And it made me really nervous, because as a consultant, and I'm sure you're the same way, Scott, like you really want to see people succeed. Like that's kind of the goal. I know what you do is very different from what I do, helping people with their operations and their financials and stuff, but you just want to see people succeed. Nobody wants to see anybody suffer, except for that neighbor I got. He plays his radio at like 3 a.m. You know what? Maybe that guy a little bit. But yeah, and I think we are now in that time where we're seeing those people that bought really poorly. They are in the position now where they're like, oh boy, I don't have any liquidity. I'm struggling to make these payments. I need to sell off the park I bought. Or if they bought a system or they bought a few parks, I need to trim off. I need to kind of prune off these bad ones and kind of hang on to the good ones. Well, guess what? Those bad ones are really hard to sell, guys. That's why they're the bad ones. So I think this is actually a pretty good time to buy, at least compared to during the pandemic. You have anything to add to that, Scott? You talk to anybody who's in the buy or sell mode?
I have spoken with some folks, and there's I would say that, you know, there's a lot of the interest rate now that I've been getting is from the perspective of new developments still, which anyway, we'll talk about that probably in a little bit. But there's a lot of trepidation out there, and people really, what I would say that I've seen the shift in the last few years is that pre-COVID, a lot of people were like, "Hey, is this industry going to grow or are we flat?" Um, and it was kind of like, and we kind of were flat. But what I always used to tell people is like, we're in a very manageable phase. We can predict about 4 or 5% growth annually. That's not bad for this type of industry. The RV industry was the same way. They were growing right around at about that same pace.
You're talking pre-COVID?
Pre-COVID.
Yeah. Okay.
Basically, COVID blew everything out of the water.
Yes.
It scoured. Obviously, we've talked about that ad nauseum, but I think what we're hoping for now again is, and during COVID, that people were like, I got to buy now because there's all this money coming in. The parks are packed to the gills and the ADR is through the roof because you can charge whatever you want because they're so packed. And now we're equalizing again. And and I feel like the inquiries that I get are very similar to what they were in the 2019 timeframe as they are now. It's like people asking, are we flat or are we going to grow again? Are we going to continue to grow? It's almost an identical type of conversation, but a different profile person I feel is looking now. Pre and especially during COVID, it was the very large investment capitalists that I was hearing from. I really don't hear from them anymore. I hear from individuals, maybe a couple people form an LLC and are looking to get into the business or trying to figure out the best way. It's a lot of kind of poking around. It's like, which avenue is best for me right now? And I feel like people are asking good questions. So I feel like the market itself is a little bit more knowledgeable now than it was.
I agree with you 100% there, especially on the who's calling. I think it's Blue Water is they're trimming, right? They're not purchasing anything right now. I think last I read, they've kind of put all their acquisitions on hold and they're trimming some things off. I think they sold big chunk of marinas recently. Don't know what that's based on, if that's based on just value being higher, they needed liquidity. But a lot of the bigger players are not looking to purchase anymore. A lot of those mid-sized groups that own maybe 10 to 15 or even 20 parks are trying to prune some of the assets that they purchased poorly when they thought that, again, every one of these things was just going to be a massive success no matter where you put it. And they were. Let's not make it out like these guys made terrible decisions. They didn't. During 21 and 22, you could print money at a campground if you owned it. I mean, it was absolutely ridiculous. You could charge what you wanted, you're still full. But now I'm seeing parks even with seasonal campers with occupancies in the 75 to 80% range. That's crazy to me. You should be able to trip over seasonal campers just about anywhere you are. If you're the kind of park that you're trying to attract short-term stays, you do need to be closer to the metro areas, to a bigger audience of people. But for a place that's a seasonal camper, you can get up to 2 hours out and people will still come and use your place as their weekend warrior getaway, right? If they can set that camper up and have it ready, I'll put a 6-pack in the trunk and the cooler. And by the time I get there, all I got to do is turn on water and electricity and I'm camping, right? It becomes a cabin for them. They'll go a little further. So I'm even seeing some of those numbers down a little bit. But again, is this some kind of crazy recession or shrinkage no, I don't think so. I think this is just, as you pointed out, this is a correction. It's sort of, we're getting back to normal. And as Brian likes to say, it's going to be a different world marketing wise. And it's no longer right now. I can't believe I'm saying this. Hopefully he's not watching, but I think he's right. This is very much, there's no more, if you build it, they're going to come. You've got to get back to work now. This is going to be like the old days, like pre-pandemic. What do they call it in Mad Max? The before times.
The before time, yes.
The before times. We're back in the before times, people. But I think that's a really good thing. I don't think that's a bad thing.
I don't either. Again, manageable growth. It's like the COVID stuff was nuts. It's like we burnt people out during COVID. And I was just talking to someone about this yesterday, about how the lingering impacts in the mindset of people. Because, again, I'm in the measurement business, and I could go out and do a study on, pick any topic that's long gone, that a trend that's doesn't exist anymore. And I guarantee you, I can find a decent percentage of people who still think that that is trending.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the mindset of the consumer, and things linger in their minds. And one of those things is like overcrowding. There's a lot of people who still think there's a lot of overcrowding.
Yeah.
Now, if you talk to a park owner, they're going to tell you, we're not overcrowded. We have space. But if you ask the consumer, and one of the things we did in some of the KOA research, that just right after the pandemic, when people were starting to talk a little bit about there being capacity, one of the things that I asked people was, have you actually experienced overcrowding?
Mm-hmm. That's
Or did
great.
you just hear about it?
Right.
And I'll tell you what, the percentage of people who actually experienced overcrowding was low. What happened was, it was part of the conversation. People talked about it, but they weren't experiencing it at the rate that a lot of people thought. So we're still feeling that. I guess that's a long way of saying we're still feeling those impacts. But there are people out there who won't try to book a campsite someplace because they're just going to assume that the campground is full. And a lot of you were talking about the weekend warriors coming out. It's like that. That's part of it. They're thinking, well, I'm not going to be able to get a site because, one, I have to stay for 2 nights. I only want one, and it's going to be full anyway. I'm not going to get that site. So again, the work that you were talking about, that's where it comes in, is working to get those people to make sure that they know. And that, again, bringing that back to ADR, valuations, all this kind of stuff. It's what impacts all that is, are you full? Do you have a lot of guests? And
right.
Are you getting the ADR that you need to pay the bills, based on your initial projections?
And that falls into that's probably a whole other show. But
Sure. Oh, God, yeah.
the talk about occupancy, I just want to touch on really quickly before we dive a little bit back into the buying and selling portion. If you're listening, folks, if you're full every weekend, that's awesome. That's not 100% occupancy. That's somewhere in the low 30s. The occupancy is every day of the week. And I know there are a lot of parks. My park was heavily weekends. It was a destination park. It was 45 minutes from metro centers, but there's nothing around us. You drive out the end of our driveway at the park that I used to own, and you were staring at 500 acres of, depending on crop rotation, soybeans or corn. Our neighbor to one side was named Hirschberger. Our neighbor to the other side, you couldn't even see. They were so far away. So we were in the middle of nowhere. We had to offer very robust activities, right? We had to have lots of active, not just passive activities, but things that we hosted and did with the guests in order to get any kind of occupancy. And almost 90% of ours was on the weekends. If we had a dozen people in our park, transients in our park on a Wednesday night, we were stoked. That's just the kind of park we were. That's not 100% occupancy if you fill up on the weekends. That's only in the 30s. You've got to figure out how to fill up those midweek days. But when you're looking at a park, so I'm going to use this transition back. You're looking at an asset to buy, or you're selling yours. If you're full on the weekends and no other time, that's actually not great. I mean, it's better than nothing because you're at least filling your weekends.
Right.
But that's only about 35% occupancy. You've got to fill those other days of the week. But again, right now, so I've got some notes. I'm not going to put them up on the screen and make everybody read through this. If anybody wants this, just shoot me an email at greg@growwithvireo or shoot one at Scott. Scott, where are you? How can they reach you?
Just Scott at Cairn Consulting Group.
Yeah, that, or you can, if you know the secret knock, whatever. I tried to land a joke there. It's going to circle. It's going to be in a holding pattern forever. But there really are, positive things going on. I would say during the pandemic, the time period I was talking about before, when valuations were just crazy out of whack, I was seeing campgrounds sell for the same type of cap rate. And the cap is sort of your projected return on investment, let's say. Okay, so if I invest X amount of dollars into this thing and it's a 10 cap, I expect to get 10% back on my money. That's pretty good, because you also have things like you have tax shelter, and because you have a physical asset, right? So it's not like getting 10% back from the stock market, which is crazy volatile. You have no control over it. You buy a business, you have things like tax shelter, you can borrow against it, and you can control it somewhat. Oh, I need more of these type of customers. Okay, I find out a plan, I market to them, and I work at it, right? So it's very different. So 10% return, that's pretty good. I was watching parks sell for 6 and 7 caps, which is typically more for an industry like self-storage that's very level, not a lot of risk, because it's typically not, you don't have a lot of liability exposure, right? You don't have a bunch of people on the land. You have buildings that you take care of. You put up lighting and cameras, and much easier, much lower risk to operate. They obviously have to be sited well, and right, you still need your feasibility studies to make sure you're building it right. But if you do that right, it's a much steadier, low risk stream. So low risk typically means low cap rate. High risk typically means higher cap rate. 8 and 10%, 9, 10, even 11%. That was nice for campgrounds pre-pandemic. Now I'm watching them sell for 6 and 7 caps. And this is where my brain starts going, wait, if I do the math on that, by the time they take out a loan and they figure out, okay, this is what they're getting now, that's great. What happens after the pandemic if things go back to normal? You're not going to be able to pay your mortgage. That's where a lot of people are now. But now the listings that I see out, and I just finished doing a valuation for a client today. And I like to look at the valuation a couple different ways. You have DSCR, debt service coverage ratio. That's all the bank cares about. They don't care about your investment. They want to know, can you cover that mortgage payment, right? So the DSCR is kind of aligning with an 8 to 10 cap. That's a really good sign if you're a buyer. If you want to buy something and you held firm through the pandemic, now's not a bad time. Interest rates, if you want to compare them to what we had pre-pandemic, they're going to seem high. But if you look at long-term, really long-term, we're actually kind of right in middle ground right now. They're not terrible. Yes, they're not great. We were spoiled by free money for a really long time, darn near free money. That's not happening anymore. But 8 to 10 caps, decent interest rates, and then you have things like the SBA 7A program. If you are short on your down payment, and you have really, really clean books for this park you're buying and a strong operations background, an SBA 7A, you can get upwards of 90 to 100% leverage. But I shouldn't even say that. Let's say 80 to 90%. 100% is nuts. I've read this. I don't know of anybody getting that. USDA is another loan program. And I believe, somebody will correct me on this if I'm wrong, both of those will allow you to borrow for construction as well. So for your CapEx ads. So if you've got a really solid park, you've got a good background of operations, you can bring them a solid business plan that makes sense. And you say, I need 1.2 for my park. This is my down payment. I'd like another 150,000 to upgrade these sites, and that's going to net me this. They will loan to you that way, whereas a conventional lender will not. That's a big deal for someone who's just making their first purchase, because that's the hardest part. Okay, I buy it, my debt service is fine, but I didn't hang on to my cash reserves. And I wish I had a little bell. Bing. Everybody pay attention. You need 10 to 20% cash reserves. You have to hang on to that, because when you buy this thing, you are going to find out the second you get behind the wheel and start running it, that there's a bunch of stuff there that owner didn't disclose to you. Not because they have bad intentions. It just doesn't dawn on them because they do it every single day. And you're going to wake up one morning and go, oh my God, did that jackass actually do A, B, C, and D every day before he got up? I got to call him. He can't possibly. And you're going to call the guy who's going to go, yeah, what are you talking about? That's the only life I had. My campground was my entire identity. So I didn't have any problem, running myself into the ground. Oh boy. Now what? Now I've got to hire somebody for that, or I've got to install some equipment to take care of it. You need those cash reserves. So make sure you've got that. Because and honestly, today's buyer personas are very cautious, and that's back to your point earlier, Scott, that you are seeing people that I think a lot of these people did sit through the pandemic and they watched and learned a lot, because it does seem like their perspectives have changed. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think it's really good, unless you're a seller. I don't think anybody's selling wants these super educated buyers that are running around right now, but that is the way it is. And good for you buyers. Keep working on it. I work with people who both sell and buy, and I feel like I agree with you. I'm seeing a lot more people that are coming into the industry with less of a they don't have that deer in the headlights look. They've been watching this for a while now and sort of waiting for this time. But yeah, and I think there are still some regional players in this, but the key now is people aren't paying anymore for the what could be. And here's, if I had the bell again, ding, don't ever, if you're buying a park, never ever pay. I've got all this other land available with my park, and you can develop that and it'll bring you another $500,000. That's fine. Don't pay for that. You have to build that. You have to invest to get there. That's only worth so much. It's worth something, but it's not worth the $500,000 that you could make with it, because you've got to put all of that in. I saw a lot of that during the pandemic. People going ahead and paying for that because they thought this was going to go on forever. And here we are. You should never pay. You're buying what is, not what can be. You have to create what can be after you buy it. So don't fall into that trap. That's a really, really dangerous place to get into. That's how you get upside down really fast. And I know, Scott, you also do feasibility studies, and right. I do as well. What are you seeing there now with the demand? I know you said that most of your clients are new build clients, whereas I get people that are owning and operating. So this discussion should be great. The feasibility study demand for me is declining significantly. And I don't know if that's because people feel more confident in their position and they just want to go ahead and move on an asset without it, or there just aren't that many transactions going down. So what are you seeing there? Are you still having strong demand for your feasibility work?
Yeah, not as much as we were. It's definitely down as well. I think it's what we saw. The first indicator was people who would inquire about it and then just say, we've decided not to move forward at this time. Now, I think we had some people flip their properties. They did some due diligence on the property, and so they could, kind of sell that package, with make a little bit off it. What we've seen a lot of is people who, the increase that we've seen is in people who have a property. They think it's a good target for some kind of development. But man, it just seems like a lot of them don't know what kind of development to do. They'll come in with an initial thought and say, this is what we think it should be, or was our original idea, but we're not sure now. Should we do this? Should we do that? A lot of concern over local ordinances as well. That's been, people have run into some roadblocks with that. I have to admit that I've seen what appears to be a little bit of buyer's remorse among some folks who bought properties thinking that they were just gonna come in and put down, some pull-through sites, and they were going to print money, and then finding out that that's not going to happen. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
And so they're taking a step back. It seems like they're taking a step back and gonna see where some of this stuff is heading. I still think there's part of me that feels like there's going to be a point where all of a sudden all these people are going to come back and say, okay, now we want to do something. We want to figure this out, because they've bought property and they're probably invested a lot of money in it. And one other thing with some of these things that we've seen are that people have bought properties that they needed to research before they bought.
Yes.
It's that pre-sale research is really important. You mentioned some stuff earlier about like being by a population center where you can grab those weekend warriors or some other natural features, some other, okay, if you have a property near Yellowstone or Yosemite, sure.
Yep.
You're probably going to be okay.
Yep.
But, some other properties, you might want to think about it a little bit more prior to doing that. What's there? What's the draw? What's the competition? And I feel like there's a little bit of that going on where people are like, oh, we should have done this before we actually bought this property. So, it's do your due diligence before buying.
Yeah, that thing is a tongue twister. I do that.
Hard to say. Because as they say in real estate, location. This is it, a prime example.
It really is, and that is probably it's the biggest trap that people fall into, my opinion, and two, it's the thing that I hate to hear most when I get the introductory call and someone tells me I've been saving a long time. I've always wanted to own a campground. I finally found the land. I bought it. It's amazing. Okay. Walk me through it. Tell me why it's amazing. Well, first of all, there's nobody around it. It's wooded. It's on all these sides. It's just gorgeous. It has these views. Okay. Lots of land has that. Keep going. What does it have going for it? Are there any utilities there? No. Maybe there's electricity on it, right? It's rural, but most rural roads have electricity. Okay, so there's electricity, okay? But there's no water, there's no sewer. Okay, you can do wells, you can do septic. Where is it? Oh, it's in the middle of nowhere, and that's why everybody's going to want to come there. First thing I usually hear in the back of my head is my own voice going, fuck. Because now I've got to try to figure out how I can make, them understand that they may have made a bad purchase, and two, how can I make a business work there for them? Because they really need it. They just put a bunch of money into it. And to your point, they didn't do anything beforehand. They saw beautiful land and they bought it. There's a lot of beautiful land. If there's no one to draw there, if there's nothing to draw them there, and don't get me wrong, I'm sure there are people out there listening right now, and I'm sure I'm thinking of parks, and I'm sure you are too. They're in the middle of nowhere. They're full all the time. Those parks have built an attraction. They've turned themselves into an attraction. And even then, they're probably still within a couple hours of 1 million people or so. Because you can't, people aren't going to go 5 hours to you. They're just not going to do it. Those parks are really hard to make pencil. And if you want to build one into a giant attraction, that's fine. But your ROI timeline is going to be very long, and you're going to need to have very deep pockets, lots of reserve money to carry yourself through as you develop, because the hardest time is in the beginning. Because say you want to build 100 sites and you're going to do it in 4 phases of 25, okay? You still have to build all the infrastructure for 100 sites, roughly 100, not the roads, not the sites themselves, but you need the wells for it. You need the electrical infrastructure. You have to put at least the base of that in place. You're going to need your wastewater treatment plant, and that's usually a massive expense if you don't have city sewer. So now you have the carrying costs from building, say, 50% of a campground, and you've got to try to run it on 25% of the income. That's really, really hard to do. especially if you're trying to build one that's an attraction and you've got swimming pools and splash pads and maybe, jumping pillows or a ropes course or something that's going to bring people to you and make them stay for 3, 4, 5 days at a time. That's really hard to carry in the beginning. So to your point, I get those calls too, and they're really frustrating, and they make me, I feel awful when I get off the phone. Jeff Hoffman, my former partner, he used to say that he kept a hat in his desk next to him that said Dream Crusher on it. And when someone would start telling him these things, he'd go, damn it. And he'd pull out the Dream Crusher hat and put it on and go, well, this part of your day is going to suck, but I got to tell you, this is bad. And typically those folks have really big blind spots too. And I'm sure you've experienced that too. No, you don't understand. I know it's going to work. I know it's going to work. And I always tell them the same thing. God, I would love to be wrong. I hope for your sake, I am very wrong. I hope that you are right, because it's just an awful thing to watch. You see somebody who says, I spent my retirement income buying this property and it's in the middle of nowhere. It's got nothing, it's got wetlands on it or something, like you can't even develop portions of it. Maybe you bought a great retirement property, but you didn't find a good one for a campground.
Yep.
So other things to watch out for, sellers with no financials. And this is really common because actually, do you have numbers on how many? I know things have been shifting with the pandemic because a lot of the REITs came in, but do you have any figures on how many of the parks out there overall are still owned by mom and pops? Last I heard, it was still something like 65 or 70%.
And that's holding true. It's going to take a while for that to. There's consolidation going on, but you're still in the ballpark there. Because it takes a lot. I mean, when you consider, KOA is the biggest franchise, owner, and they have just over 500 parks.
Yep.
Out of the thousands that are out there. So, there's some of that going on. There's even some groups that are selling off some of theirs, even. So, overall, it's still a mom and pop business.
It really is. And so you still run into those deals where you meet mom or pop and they've got, maybe a handwritten ledger to show the, I don't know anyone that's doing this, in case anyone from the IRS is watching. I know no one that's doing this. In a lot of places, it's still a cash business, and a lot of that still goes into people's pockets. It just does. There's a lot of skimming that goes on. I've seen half a dozen sets of books this year, roughly. Maybe about 6. 3 of them were they included like a wink when you got them, and it was you'll need to look at our tax returns, and then I can show you some other bank statements from over here, and you'll see the numbers kind of match up over here. Okay, another one I'm going to ding the bell on. None of that matters. If it doesn't show on their tax returns, if they can't show it to you, if it's not all reported, then that value is not in the business and you don't pay for it. That affects the valuation. And on the flip side, if anyone out there is listening and you've got that handwritten book and you've got some bank statements from another account, stop doing that. Think about what I said before, a 10 cap, 10%, right? That means that if your park has an NOI of $100,000, you apply a 10 cap to it, you sell it for $1 million. Okay, if your NOI is 100,000, just for simple math, it's $1 million sale price. So for every $10,000 that you put in your pocket, add that 0 to it. You're taking $100,000 of value off of your campground, off of your asset. That might seem great. You might think, what do I care? I'm going to be here forever. No, you're not. I can promise you, my dad thought he was going to be at our place forever. And you know what happened? He got to be 80. It's really hard to work a campground when you're 80. A lot of people are doing it, but eventually that asset's going to transfer to a family member. It's going to sell. If you're taking $10,000 and putting it in your pocket, you are taking $100,000 off the value of your asset. And it's not just for when you sell it. Don't forget that someday you may need to borrow money. What if you need to go to the bank and you say, okay, I'd like to borrow $50,000. I need to put in, a new small flow septic system or whatever it is. Well, I don't know. Your business doesn't seem like it's worth much. That's because of that skim you're doing, because they're not going to believe you either. they're not going to care, right? A
Right.
banker just wants to see what's in your receipts. And if you've got $20,000, $30,000 missing, that's $200,000 to $300,000 in value of your property. So don't do it. Paying taxes in a way sucks, but you know what it means? It means you're making money. I pay taxes. No, I'm just kidding. I pay taxes. Anyway, I pay all my taxes. Everything's up front, and it should be. It does stink, and I get it. But we've all got to do our part. We all pay into the pot. Maybe they don't spend it right. Yada yada. Just do it. Just pay taxes. It's good for you. That's a really big one. The not finding out, not contacting someone like Scott or myself or another professional first who can tell you, I don't think this land is a good buy for these reasons. It's in a spot where I don't think you can work anything out, right? Scott can go into his data, I can go into my experience, and we can just say, like, this is, you really should be within 90 minutes, 2 hours max of a million or so people. You really should have some utilities nearby. And as the utilities go, I don't know if you have anything to contribute to this, Scott, but I know for me, I will take a property that has city water and no sewer over a property that has access to city sewer and no city water any day. Because if you've got to operate your own wastewater, that can be a drag. It's a shitty job. There we go. I landed that one.
There we go.
But if you screw it up, nobody gets sick, right? You screw up your drinking water, ooh, that can be really, really bad, right? If your chlorination goes down or your filtration goes down, that can be really ugly. So I'll take that any day of the week. You got thoughts there on park development?
No, I agree. Thinking about those things is amazing. There's another, part of the equation, and you know more about this than I do, I'm sure, Greg. But I know a lot of people in the insurance industry, and they always talk about making sure you talk to a risk manager, a risk evaluator. It's worth your time and money.
100%. And I'll tell you what, we can use that as our final point as we start to look to close this out. I hope we've touched on enough stuff here to make this worthwhile, and maybe we just scratch the surface, and we'll get some. I don't see anything in the chat that I can see yet, but hopefully we'll get some good feedback from people out there listening. But the last thing I wanted to lean into really is the insurance side. Insurance rates, especially for outdoor hospitality, partially because of climate type disasters, fires, flooding, seawater, coastal, what am I trying to say? Sea level rise. Thank you. All of that stuff, it has gone through the roof. I have seen anything from 20% increases in 1 year to, I actually have one client who has a coastal property and they do things like horseback riding. It's lovely, but that's a lot of exposure. Their rate went up 75% in 1 year. Insurance rates are going through the roof. So to Scott's point, find a risk manager, find someone who can help you assess this stuff right off the bat. There are really good companies out there who specialize in this. Don't go, you can find, if you look around your neighborhood enough, you'll find an insurance agent that will write you a policy for a campground or a glamping operation. That is the worst thing that you can do. You need to find someone who is absolutely rooted in outdoor hospitality, and there are some good ones out there, and go with them. They know what you're going to be getting yourself into. Check with them before you even get into it. Check with somebody like Scott, myself. Is this land worthwhile? Does it have the right population nearby? Does it have utilities nearby? Internet. That's not, and I know you've got numbers on this one, that's not a maybe anymore. That's an absolute expectation. If you don't have it, how are you going to get it? Starlink is available everywhere. Try to put 300 campsites on Starlink and watch how slow it gets, and watch how expensive it gets, because the satellite systems all have data caps. And as you break those, you continue to go up monthly in your cost.
Yep.
And while I know you've mentioned that the work from the campground thing is not as popular as it once was, because to use that's become a fuck y'all, right? People don't want to work on their vacation, right? They may have to, but they don't want to, but they still require that connectivity, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. The demand continues to rise while the usage for work purposes is declining, which is kind of interesting. But over time, it's just become an expected amenity.
Yeah, because who doesn't have a smart TV in their rig now? And I mean, who's not walking around like a cyborg with their phone attached to their hand?
Right. Right.
I mean, it's just the way it is. Nobody wants to use their data. I know a lot of owners that say, well, screw them. If they want that, they should travel with their own hotspot. You just cut down your customer base. Like that's true to some degree. I kind of agree with it. I want to go camping. I essentially start walking down a trail until I see that last bar disappear and I see I have no service. And then I know I'm exactly where I want to be.
Right.
I'm in the minority. And I think you are too, right, Scott? I mean, you enjoy
Absolutely.
your being disconnected. We're in the minority. For sure we're in the minority. And that's because neither one of us has an RV. We may not be the right people for this show, actually.
Yeah. I know. I always tell people the story of when I first started working with KOA, Jim Rogers, the CEO, was like, he goes, have you ever stayed at a KOA campground? And I'm like, no. he actually, it's the only time in all the years I worked with him that he got a little bit angry with me, because he doesn't usually it wasn't like that, but he got a little angry with me, like, really? And I'm like, anyway, so I stayed. I did. We went. It was a good experience, but yeah, I have stayed in an RV though, so I can at least say that.
Yeah, they seem nice on the surface, and then you watch all that maintenance, and you're like, oh boy.
Yep.
I'm grateful for those people that own them because, well, they make up the base of the industry, and I love this, and I 100% love this industry. Are there a lot of strange nuances to it? Yeah, of course. Like anything else, like any other industry, it has its ups and downs and its dark side, and it's awesome. It's wonderful. The people in it, I love it. That's why I continue to work like this. I could go do other stuff. I like to work in the outdoor hospitality industry with people
awesome.
like you and Brian. I mean, yeah, I don't, is it just because of the word hospitality? Like it's just ingrained in all of us.
It might be. It might be part of it, but it's that the intersection of just liking to be outside and, kind of immersing yourself in it, and having work that's related to something that you really like is amazing. So yeah,
it is pretty awesome. And so I think at this point we're going to do something that might go against all the forces of nature, but I think we're done.
I think so too.
Wait, I'm going to do a pivot. It's been a long time. There's the pivot. We didn't have an anyway yet, although I caught one a second ago. There's only been a few of them this show, which might mean that I've talked too much, and I apologize if I have. But to recap everything, I think it's a good time to buy if you're looking to buy. It's not a great time to sell. If you've got one and you're thinking about selling it, if you're not able to put a real valuation on it, call a broker. It doesn't hurt to have a conversation with them. Let them know what your numbers are like, just high level. They can give you kind of an idea of where you're at. Call a Kathy Hill Reinert or a Ryan Grand over at Marcus Millichap. Those are two that I really know and trust. I don't know if you got any you want to throw out. I don't even know if I should be plugging anybody, but those two, they're great people. And I've seen them do really good things for people, both telling them, yeah, I'll take your park on and sell it, and flat out just telling them I'm not even going to take it because it's not a good idea for you right now, right? It's just bad for you. This would be a bad time for you to sell. You should maybe do these things, get your numbers to here, and then come back to me in a year or 2 or 3. Call somebody like that. Call somebody like me or Scott. Let us take a look at your stuff. There are very few consultants that I know out there that flip the meter on the second you call them.
Correct. Correct.
We have a ton of goodwill in what we do, right? And I would imagine you the same way.
Absolutely. And between the two of us, if we started to list out all the connections we have across the industry, it would be we could spend the next hour doing that, but we're not.
Absolutely.
But we have that. Between the two of us, we know a lot of these folks. So please reach out.
Yeah. Much rather see you put yourself in a great situation now, whether it be walking away from a deal, And just even getting into it, just scratching the surface, it might not be a few $1,000s. You might be in the tens of thousands of dollars doing feasibility work and doing campground inspections and due diligence work. And if you can't afford that, you probably can't afford the park. So think about your cash position. Think about what you need to do to buy it. If you have questions, reach out to us. We're not flipping the meter on. We just want to see people get into the industry and succeed, because the more people that do that, the better it is for us, the better it is for the industry as a whole. And we just keep charging into the future strong. I think that's where we leave.
That's a great pep talk,
wasn't it? I tried. I really tried. I didn't even write that one down. I landed that.
That was good. So yeah, and the only thing I would say at the end of this, and it's not going to sound as uplifting as Greg's, but I feel like it is a positive thing to say and for people to hear. Greg alluded to it earlier, but sometimes no is the right answer.
Yep.
You just, sometimes that's the way it is. And sometimes it's no, and you move on and start your next adventure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the one thing I have learned, I'm not going to let you get the last word. That's not even why I'm doing it. You can have it back, actually. But I just had to throw this in because people do this, and you know this better than anybody because of what you do. No, a no, or I tried this and it didn't work. That's not failure, folks. That's data. That's what science looks like on a lot of levels. I tried this, it didn't work. You know what that means? That's good data. That means I don't have to spend more time and resources on this. I go to the next thing. And if that doesn't work, I'm still not failing. I've eliminated yet another thing that doesn't work. You just keep moving until you find the one that does. But that doesn't mean that you're failing. Just to Scott's point, don't rush. No is not a bad thing. Just take your time until you find the right one, but do the work. Find out if it's the right one. Don't tell yourself that it is and then run in with all that confirmation bias. Figure it out logistically, realistically, using data, using scientific method. And then now we've zeroed in on one. This is the one. And that's the one you get. And then you're set. And there it is. Do you want it? I'll let you have it because I screwed you on that one. That was really good too. I shouldn't have done
that. No, that was great. That was great.
All right. We are out of here, folks. Thank you so much for joining us, Sans Brian. Now I will see if I can run the outro the way I'm supposed to. And we'll see you next week, everybody.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take care.